This special 158th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg episode is brought to you by our T-shirt store. Go to addressinggettysburg.com/shop and use promo code AG10 at checkout for 10% off. Our designs feature the works of Mike Stretch of Heritage Depot and Ty DeWitt of 1863 Designs. Be a proud Gettys nerd and support the show with a T-shirt, sweatshirt, tank top, Letterman jacket, and more. That's addressinggettysburg.com/shop, promo code AG10 for 10% off.
I cannot believe that I did it in my capstone.
Okay.
Confederates marched into Grafton to take down a Union flag where there was a Union loyalist. George Ladman had a recruitment station in his law office, and he had said
there's no time.
Willing, and the next thing you know, the Confederates come in to take down the flag.
There is no time.
Marching into town, somebody throws a chair at the Confederate officer.
I have told you there is no time for that. There is no time.
He actually goes and he goes to give the order to fire.
How'd you pull that up so quick?
Ladderman.
I have it on these buttons.
Oh, okay.
There's Ladderman standing in the doorway.
Preset there.
And the Confederate commander looks around, sees all these Unionists on the roofs and in the windows.
There is no time.
Doorways, and he goes, "I dare you to fire your gun."
Yeah,
Give the order.
Quiet.
And that's when they retreat back to Philly.
Sure.
Quiet.
What you got? Is that the
outline?
outline?
Recording that, was it?
What?
You was recording.
I've been recording this whole time.
Oh my!
I was talking to you through the soundboard. So, you have some. I'll play it for you later.
Eric, make him stop.
You can't hear him anyway, Cam. All right, are we ready, guys?
Yeah.
All right, let's get this money machine rolling here. Here we go.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is the third installment of our anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg shows, July 3rd. Actually, it's our fourth. Sorry. Our first one was June 30th. We added one this year. Silly me. Anyway, it's our fourth. We're doing July 3rd today. And as I've said on the previous ones, we're going to get right into it because these take a little longer usually. So we're going to start off with our guests today. Once again, the great, the irreparable Charlie Fennell. Not irreparable. Incomparable. That's what I meant to say.
Irreparable might be more accurate.
Irreparable, yeah. Ask his wife.
Yeah, right. So Charlie's back on the show. Thank you for coming on, Charlie.
Thanks for asking.
Always. And a new guide to our show here, an old friend. I haven't seen all last year because of the coronavirus. You didn't come out. And glad that you're finally out and about this year. John Krepps, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, thank
Welcome,
you.
John.
Thank you, Matt. Good to be here.
Good to have you. Good to see you again. I haven't seen you in so long. You used to come by and talk at the window on your way to tours.
Well, hopefully it won't be long again.
Yes, good. Yes. All right, so July 3rd. Why don't we start off? Charlie, why don't you start us off and tell us where the battle lines are on July 3rd? Where's everybody starting off from when the sun comes up?
Well, of course, the Union line's still pretty much in the fishhook. Little Round Top, Big Round Top, all the way up to Cemetery Hill, along Cemetery Ridge before you get there. It circles around to Culp's Hill, but the real fly in the ointment, so to speak, is the lower slopes of Culp's Hill are in the possession of the Confederates. So it's the only time in the battle that the Confederates occupied a major portion of the Union fishhook line, and that's on the easternmost point of the hook. They're within about 500 yards of the Baltimore Pike. Now, the Confederates, besides being there, they still have their line through the town and then runs along Seminary Ridge, but they are also in Devil's Den. They're at the foot of Big Round Top, and they still hold on to the Peach Orchard line there along the Emmitsburg Road.
Okay. So
this was Sickles' position for the most part on July 2nd. So they're a little closer to the Union position on the morning of the 3rd than they were the morning of the 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is Lee's plan for July 3rd? Does he have a plan?
Yes, he does. Lee wrote in his report that the plan, of course, remained unchanged. And the plan was, of course, to try and get the Union soldiers off Cemetery Hill. And so basically the plan was on the morning of the 3rd to have Longstreet reinforced by General Pickett's division, which had arrived the night before, to strike what Lee believed was the left of the Union line, while General Ewell and his men ensconced on the slopes of Culp's Hill would attack the right flank. What Lee means by the left flank is not Little Round Top.
Right.
It would be Cemetery Ridge. One of the things we need to straighten out here, I guess, is that from Lee's perspective, Cemetery Ridge is actually part of Cemetery Hill. Mm-hmm. So it's a lower slopes.
Good point.
Lee does not know that there's a parking lot between Cemetery Hill and Cemetery. He can't see it from his perspective.
Right,
so that's something you need to consider. Attack at dawn, both ends, Union line.
Right, okay. So what happens to his plans, though? Do they get foiled?
Well, there's a couple of things. Number one is that as the battle began on Culp's Hill, pretty much on schedule, it was pretty much started by the Union. Okay, so they're going to kind of preempt them in a sense because they opened fire around 4:30 in the morning with artillery from the Baltimore Pike and from Powers Hill.
Okay.
In anticipation of driving the Confederates off the Union position that they had seized the day before, but Longstreet wasn't ready.
Right, okay. So let's pause on this part of the field for now.
Okay.
Set the stage on Culp's Hill. John, jump in anytime you want.
What I would like to, one thing I always found fascinating, Charlie, about that whole scenario that I sometimes stress to people on tours is that Culp's Hill on the morning of the 3rd is an area where both sides had planned an offensive.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think that makes it so confusing for the average visitor. And I think you'd mentioned the word preempt.
Yes.
My impression is, and I want you to correct me on this, is that basically the Confederates want to try to use the foothold they gained on the lower summit to attain the upper summit.
Exactly.
And that the Union, in effect, wants to take back the lower summit. But basically what happens is once those Union artillery fires, that sets in motion events that just escalate out of control, in a sense, for almost both sides. Because then it's that preempts, that causes the fighting to erupt in Culp's Hill, and things just spiral from there.
Yeah, nowhere else on the field I think you can see the truism of warfare and battle is that the first casualty of any battle is the plan.
Right,
Okay?
yeah, exactly.
And that was on Culp's Hill. Both plans were casualties as soon as the first gun fired.
Yeah.
Okay. And is it fair to say that General Williams of the Union is going to launch small-scale attacks like we see the 20th Connecticut, their attack, 1st Maryland Potomac Home Brigade, and of course 27th Indiana's 2nd Massachusetts. But those particular small-scale attacks do not really result in anything but Union casualties.
Right. Yeah. The plan, I guess, as it was explained that evening, was that the artillery would fire, which they did first thing in the morning. Williams was to make probes.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And that's what you see with these, these small-scale attacks that you're referring to. The main attack was to be launched by General Geary.
Gotcha. From the upper summit.
From the upper summit down to drive the Confederates out, which is why you have the 66 Ohio jumping over the other side of the trenches. But the Confederates, who were in front of Greene's line that night, who had charged up to the breastworks and then were repulsed, could hear the Union soldiers. They were that close, and so they talked amongst themselves, and they said, at the first chance we get in the morning, we're going to attack.
So is it it sounds kind of funny now, but is it fair to say that the Union artillery along the axis of the Baltimore Pike messes up the initial Confederate plan, and then the Confederate advances of infantry after that mess up the Union plan?
Yes, I think you can make a case for that. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. The first casualty is the plan. So both plans are out the window
at that point.
Yeah, as soon as it starts.
No, you just said something before that the Union Confederates can hear each other.
Yes.
And they were talking amongst them. Who was talking amongst themselves?
Well, you can.
They were talking to each other?
No.
Okay.
They could hear the other side, talking.
So the Confederates are talking amongst themselves, saying we're going to attack.
I think it was Colonel Zabel that said that, and he's with the Louisiana Brigade.
Okay.
Their Williams Brigade, and he said that we could hear them. We knew our position was not a strong one compared to theirs, and so we decided that the best thing we could do to mask the weakness of our situation was to attack at first chance.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So the artillery that starts firing is who orders that?
Well, it's
shoot?
the plan. Well, it's a plan on the evening of July 2nd. We know we had the Corps Commanders Conference at Mead's headquarters, and when they were leaving, Williams was expressing concern that while his division was absent, Geary was ordered off Culp's Hill. And that allowed the Confederates to get a lodgment on it. And Williams pretty much told them, well, not to worry, we'll drive them out at dawn. So Slocum was already starting to plan the attack. And they had Claremont Best, who had been the Corps commander of the artillery at Chancellorsville 2 months before. He requested him to arrive from Washington, D.C., so Best is with the 12th Corps, but he has no official capacity.
Okay.
And I think, Slocum through Best, because the Corps commander of the artillery of the 12th Corps is a lieutenant.
Right.
Lieutenant Muhlenberg. Okay. And so I think Slocum wanted someone with a little more experience. So Best put those guns in position with the assumption that as soon as, crack of dawn, you fire. So I'm not exactly sure if Slocum gave the order or Best gave the order or Williams gave the order, but it was ordered, yeah.
Also, getting back to the Council of War,
okay.
If I recall correctly, Meade expresses some surprise that Williams is present.
Absolutely.
And this goes back to the situation where apparently Slocum still considers himself to be a wing commander.
Correct.
Therefore, Slocum considers Williams to be the 12th Corps commander. So how does that, in your view, does that play into that also with any kind of confusion as to starting as the attack's getting rolling, or is that not a factor at this point? Has that situation been straightened out by the morning of the 3rd?
Is Slocum just the 12th Corps commander now, or is he still wing commander?
That situation was straightened out at the Corps Commanders Conference.
Okay.
So it was a factor on the 2nd.
It was a factor. That's what I thought.
You had a confusion of command. You had an extra layer.
Gotcha.
The longer the wire is, the more likely the charge is to be weak.
But that confusion has been taken care of by that meeting.
Yeah, when Meade looked at Slocum and said, what's he doing here?
Gotcha.
Referring to Williams, and then Slocum explained, well, he's the Corps commander, I'm the wing commander. And Meade said to him, well, I think you'd assume that since part of your wing's on Culp's Hill and the other part's on Little Round Top, it didn't apply anymore.
Okay.
But I mean, it was something that maybe Meade should have expressed to Slocum, because I don't think Slocum's going to assume things not in evidence. So, I mean, what you have here, of course, obviously in both armies, is you have people who are working with other people at different levels of command that they haven't done before, like Lee and Hill and Ewell, and the same thing with Meade. Meade is a Corps commander, 4 days before the battle. And now he's the Army commander, and he's assuming that these people are going to do what he wants without having to tell them.
And we see that throughout the ranks on both sides, which is crucial.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So that there's not any confusion of command on July 3rd.
Okay.
It's been settled. Okay.
So the artillery fires off. Does the Union infantry attack? Do they get to attack, or what happens at this point after the artillery is going off?
Well, with the artillery going off, the Confederates will attack Geary's line first, so he doesn't launch an attack.
So Geary is holding the upper slope of Culp's Hill.
The 66th Ohio is going to swing out.
And they're from Williams's division?
Yes, they are.
They're
Candy. They're
just a different brigade.
Yeah, different regiment. Candy's brigade is scattered from Pardee Field to the top of Culp's Hill.
Okay.
So they're kind of intermixed with the
So they're moved over from that area up to where their monument is.
Yeah, Candy had left the night before. Candy and Kane both left. Green stayed behind. Kane will turn around and come back and participates in the closing moments of the fighting on July 2nd, but Candy marched across Rock Creek and got the Moon's autos and stopped. Okay, because now they know they're going the wrong way. But it's dark and it's
just like, wait a second, there's an auto shop here.
Yeah, so so Geary's with candy.
It's okay.
So they waited till they had people come and get them, and then they brought them back behind Greene's lines.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because there was some confusion with Kane, certainly with Ruger's brigade. As they were coming back, they walked into the Confederate line, which was their line, now held by the Confederates.
Right.
And so they brought Candy in behind the upper slope, and then his regiments were parceled out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then Ewell attacks Culp's Hill, basically, is what's going to happen.
Right.
Who does he attack with? How many? Like, give us some numbers. X versus X.
Okay. You got close to 9,000 plus Confederates on the hill total. Mm-hmm. You have close to 12,000 Union.
Okay.
Okay, so the Union slightly outnumber the Confederates, but they had sent 4 other brigades to the hill, the Confederates being they, on the evening of the second, morning of the third. And they would be Daniels, there'd be O'Neill, there'd be Walker and Smith, extra Billy. So those 4 brigades came in to participate in the expected attack at dawn on July 3rd. The Union, of course, the 12th Corps returns. And eventually, as the fighting progresses, you will have Shaler's brigade sent over by Meade around 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay, so you have the 6 brigades of the 12th Corps and then 1 brigade of the 6th Corps that will participate in the fighting on the 3rd. So, close to 23,000 Americans.
Okay. And how does the fight progress? How does it go?
For the Union, it goes fairly well, I guess. They made some mistakes, of course, but the Confederates failed in 3 attempts. There were 3 separate assaults on the upper hill.
Okay.
Okay, and all 3 were repulsed with some loss. So
are these the same brigades that are assaulting that portion of the hill as yesterday on the 2nd?
Okay, there are some. I mean, Williams is involved in one of the attacks. Stewart's involved in the final one. Mm-hmm. Jones, as far as I can tell, and I know he's credited with one of the attacks by Fawns, I don't think he makes an assault. I think he's staying down that stone wall and shooting because he knows the futility of it. Mm. He's seen it before. You're not going to go up this on the upper.
And they're attacking the steepest part of the hill.
Steepest part of the hill.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's almost impenetrable.
Wall.
Yeah. And so they stay behind the wall. And they shoot up distance. So it's Stonewall Brigade's going to make a couple assaults there. Daniels Brigade, Stonewall, Daniels, Stewart are the final attack. O'Neill was involved in one of the ones in the middle with Williams there. And then, of course, in the morning, you would have the Stonewall Brigade, Stewart's Brigade, and Williams, because they were already in position to make the attack. So.
And how does it work? Does it work out?
No.
The
Union held because of the breastworks for one thing,
right?
And of course now the Northerners actually outnumber the Southerners. So the problem you have on Culp's Hill for the Confederates, you can't go around it now.
Mm-hmm, right.
You go too far to the right, you're going to get hit with artillery from Cemetery Hill. You go around to the left, you're at Powers Hill.
Right.
All the artillery there, so you're forced to punch a hole in it. So your sphere of operation is greatly restricted to an area about half the size of the wheat field is what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, how long does the fighting at Culp's Hill take on the morning of the 3rd?
4:30 a.m., 11:30, 7 hours roughly.
Jeez.
And that is, if I recall, arguably the longest sustained combat in the U.S. Civil War.
Yeah.
Arguably.
Oh, really?
I don't know. Maybe
I knew it.
Can
you
you think of another case?
Well, Spotsylvania. Muleshoe.
Yeah, there you go.
Probably longer. But anyway, it's the longest at Gettysburg.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt about it.
So as that's going on, the Confederates are just assaulting, falling back, and assaulting again. Is that basically how it's going, or?
Yeah, I mean, they have skirmishers out all the time shooting.
And interchanging troops consistently. Right. Which one of the things I think that makes that so hard to interpret also is that if I recall correctly, I think Johnson in his official report talks about 3 attacks on the 3rd, but I don't think he says which brigade specifically or which ones.
That's right.
And I still remember in my guide test back in 94 when I took the guide test, one of the questions was, I thought it was fantastic question. It refers back to what you were saying, Matt. Which Confederate brigades were involved in the fighting on Culp's Hill on the morning of the 3rd that were not involved on the second day, meaning O'Neill and Daniels of Rhodes' division, and extra Billy Smith of Early's division. And so there's just a constant reshuffling of troops there, and it's tough to put together.
See, that's right. I forgot that they borrowed O'Neill and Daniels' brigades.
And would it be fair to say, my impression is that the saddle or the swale between the lower summit and the upper summit becomes the real meat grinder for the Confederates.
It is.
Because that area, if I recall, was also referred to as the Valley of Death.
Yes.
There were Union forces after the battle that went out there in that area in the swale and claimed that they could walk amongst the Confederate bodies without ever touching the ground.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you hear about the Valley of Death in front of Little Round Top, if I recall correctly, that Valley of Death, the name was given by a newspaper correspondent.
Yes.
Whereas the Valley of Death in Culp's Hill was actually named by soldiers that actually fought there.
Who actually knew.
Who actually,
That's right.
Eric, what's that story about the ramrod and the guy in the tree? Tell that story. And when that was in that area, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's an aftermath thing that comes from. Who is that, Charlie? Is that the 111th? That's Blanchard from the 111th.
Yeah, 11th, yeah.
He wrote that letter in like 1910 or so.
Yeah.
And he talks about during the aftermath, they're going out with the burial details, and there's a rebel pinned to a tree with a ramrod that had been shot through his chest.
Yeah. Yep. That's true.
We're actually going to try to raise the money to get like ballistics gel and like or a pig carcass or something.
Try to see if we can recreate
and try to recreate that this year. So, ladies and gentlemen,
Good luck with
contact
that.
me if you want to help us. We're going to do it on video, slow mo. Okay, so we have we've got meat grinder. That's where we are. So the meat grinder you're talking about is where, like, around where the 111th, 137th, those monuments are, the 29th PA and all that?
In what we call the saddle or the swale in between now. And also I want to throw out a little kudos here to our colleague Tim Smith. Because I still remember several years ago when I went on a walk of Culp's Hill with Tim Smith and Gary Edelman, and Tim was very adamant that he had found in the Adams County Historical Society, when he looked through the records and the deeds, that a portion of what we now call Culp's Hill was owned by the Culp family, but another portion of what we own Culp's Hill is actually owned by the Spangler family.
Right.
He calls it Spangler's Hill.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Shout out to Tim on that.
Yes.
For our purposes here, when I do tours, I still refer it to the lower summit of Culp's Hill and the upper summit, just for simplicity for visitors.
Right.
So that's kind of what we're doing here.
But I mean, I guess he's right, though. Technically, it's Spangler's Hill.
Technically, part of it was Spangler's Hill.
Yeah.
Well, we can call it that if you want.
I'll just,
we can refer to it as that or whatever as we go forward now. So, but that area there between Spangler's Hill and Culp's Hill is this meat grinder area. Why is that so particularly horrendous?
If I may, part of it is, if you look at the way the Union troops built their earthworks and entrenchments, they're not in a straight line, and they're not in a straight line deliberately.
Right.
They're built that way to give the Union troops interlocking and converging fields of fire in multiple areas in the hill. So we have some places on Culp's Hill, particularly in the swale, where Confederate units are advancing and they're being shot at from more than one direction at the same time.
I mean, it had to be such a mess.
We think in today's society, we tend to think about these terms like interlocking fields of fire and converging fields of fire as like modern day inventions. No, they were utilized back then too, in this case with devastating effect.
Yeah. So they're kind of going into, what would they be getting hit from, like three sides, right, left, and front? If they're coming straight into that area there?
You could probably argue that through three, at least two, at least almost like a semicircle in a way.
Yeah, well, because that's kind of the way it is. I wouldn't want to be hit from one side.
Right.
So, okay, so let's move it along then. So now are we at the end of the fight for Culp's Hill yet, or is there more you want to tell about it?
Well, one thing I want to add to the interlocking fields of fire, if you look where Pardee Field is.
Yes.
There's a stone wall there. And the Union soldiers gained that wall and held it for a while, and they could fire right up the swell. So they're firing, they're firing right up the swell. So the Confederates got to seek cover from the fire coming from the upper slope, which is in front of them, and now they're getting significant fire coming from the left flank. They're shooting right up the swell.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So the Culp's Hill fight, the final assault, was done around 10:30.
Okay.
And that would be Daniels, Stonewall Brigade, and Stewart. And that's the one that, where Stewart's men come out into the Pardee Field and were driven back by artillery fire, but the Maryland unit made a significant advance and then was halted there by elements. Eastern Shore.
Yeah,
right.
Marylanders
shooting at Marylanders on Culp's Hill.
We should probably point out for people who are new to all this stuff, when you're saying Stewart, you're not talking about Jeb Stewart, you're talking about Maryland Stewart.
George Stewart. Yeah, and it's nice that they would spell their names differently.
Exactly.
Yes.
With an E and not an E.
And then there's a Tennessee Stewart.
Right.
And he's Stewart. And so we had a rule that if you're Stewart, you got to spell your name different than the other.
Yes.
So we know who you're talking about.
And then there's Stewart, Stooart.
Right, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
The Colonel. That's right. All right, so talk about Pardee Field. You mentioned Pardee Field.
Yes.
There's a big rock in the middle of it that says Pardee Field.
Yes.
When I first moved here, I got all excited because I thought that's where you go to get drunk on the battlefield, but
Pardee
no,
Field,
it's spelled differently.
Yeah.
What's the big deal about Pardee Field? What happened there?
Well, one of the things that happened there, of course, is that the Union soldiers were able to go across the field and get that stone wall.
Okay.
Which they could fire up the swell.
Okay.
That was the 147th Pennsylvania.
Because they're coming back from that area, right? The farmland that they took to get back is right there on right above it, that little hill above it that overlooks Pardee Field.
Right.
Opposite where that stone wall is, opposite the stone wall.
Now beyond the stone walls are trenches.
Right, and that's where they're trying to get to.
They're trying to get the Confederates out of those trenches.
Right. How did they discover that the Confederates were there? This was on the previous night, correct?
Yeah, they walked in there and got shot at.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't the one guy went out and
3 cheers for Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, 3 cheers for Abraham Lincoln and the Union, and he almost got killed.
Yeah,
like the woods lit up.
That is still that to me is a fascinating aspect of the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, when Union troops on the evening or late afternoon of the evening of the 2nd are ordered away from Culp's Hill towards the southern part of the battlefield, then they return after the sun has already set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't initially realize there's Confederates have taken over some of their entrenchments.
Yeah.
So here we have a situation where it's nighttime on the night of the 2nd and into the morning of the 3rd. It's in a mostly wooded area, and no one knows who's who.
Yeah.
I mean,
which is one of the reasons why you don't fight at night. They always said you always find the enemy's lines before you find your own. That sure was the case on Culp's Hill.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, I interrupted you with the Pardee Field thing, so continue with that.
The 5th Ohio's there shooting up the swell as well. And it's interesting about the 5th Ohio, just to throw in here just for people that like non-essential information. They actually have air rifles. They're using air rifles. It's in the official report. Yeah, it's pump guns, I think.
Little Red Riders or whatever those were?
Yeah, they're shooting the BB guns.
Yeah.
They'll shoot their eye out.
But actually, Lewis and Clark took them on their expedition.
I've heard of this,
And that's because you run out of powder, you can still pump this gun up and shoot a projectile at somebody. And the Confederates thought it was kind of nefarious because it doesn't make a noise,
right?
And it doesn't leave smoke.
Oh, it's not a gentleman's.
It's not a gentleman's weapon.
We can't find it.
But anyway,
that's sneaky.
Of course, now eventually those men are going to fall back from that wall. And then the Confederates, when they make their assault, which is probably more famous about Pardee Field, as they come over the wall, there's that Rothamel painting that's up in Harrisburg of the attack with the little dog leading the charge. And that's Pardee Field. They're coming across.
Right.
Yeah.
Go back to these air guns.
Okay.
How effective were those?
Boy, I don't know. I never really read an account where they actually killed anyone with them, to be honest with you. But it's just a fascinating little tidbit of what's going on in Culp's Hill.
And they would be pumped?
I think they would be. They don't have CO2 cartridges like we do today.
No. Mark,
if it's anything like the one that I'm familiar with, you have 2 air tanks that double as the buttstock, right? And it's You have to pump it like 500 times.
Yeah.
It's like
Wow.
It's like a almost an 18th, 19th century version of a bicycle pump.
Okay.
But they're
I'm
like
looking at it.
yeah,
now.
the Girondoni.
Girondoni. There you go. Girondoni air rifle. That is crazy. Okay,
Yeah,
keep talking
and
there.
it's
Keep talking.
so the pressure vessel is the buttstock,
Yeah.
and whenever you run out of air in that one, you
just gotta blow it
unscrew
up.
it, you screw the other one on,
Okay.
and then you keep firing, and you get quite a bit of quite a few shots out of them.
Sure.
They're like 36 calibers, so you can do damage with it.
Especially if the target gets close.
Yeah.
Charlie, what are we talking here about numbers of men that might have it? This is new to me. I never
Yeah,
even
I don't
realized
know.
this.
I mean, the
Are we
regiment
talking
had.
one company or?
Well, I don't even know if there's that many, to be honest
Okay.
with you. It might have just been a few guys that had them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I never-
Gotcha.
Which regiment was it?
5th Ohio.
5th Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that either.
Wow.
That's
Cincinnati
a new one
regiment.
to me.
Okay.
Good Lord,
Yeah.
that is crazy.
Yeah, right? Look at that.
Yeah, it looks like too much work. I'd rather die.
Well, I mean, you're supposed to pump the tanks up before you
Yeah, you go.
Well,
in
yeah.
do anything
There
with
we
them.
go.
You just carry them around.
Yeah.
And then how do you
Phil.
like the tank looks rounded?
Yeah.
So how does it
Yeah.
fit into your?
It doesn't very much, but
Yes,
there's
it's
really
like
not
you-
that much recoil.
You put it
it's
under
an air
your
rifle.
Yeah. it's
Oh,
an air rifle,
Good
sure.
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that is something, ladies and gentlemen. Google that. What's it called again?
The Girondoni air
Girondoni.
rifle.
Girardoni.
There's
air
a
rifle.
there's a guy on YouTube. It's called Forgotten Weapons, but he did like a 25 or 30-minute video on one of those things on an original
Wow,
one.
okay.
That's like 1780s.
Yeah.
But does it
And
also
he goes through like how it worked and
fire black powder?
no.
No.
Oh, so it's just
it's
air.
Just an
just
air
air, yeah.
rifle. Yeah.
That is nuts. That is crazy. All right. Well, sorry for that detour,
okay,
folks,
yeah.
but I think we're all glad we learned that.
Kind of what we're known for. here.
Yes, it's true. The ADD show.
Charlie, in between, like we talked about, that Johnson mentions 3 distinct attacks against
Okay.
Culp's Hill in the morning of the 3rd. After each attack, is there any indication? I get the impression that in between those attacks, the Confederates are pretty much pinned down.
Yes.
In other words, it's not a case where they make an attack and fall completely off the hill and then make another sweep up.
That's correct.
That they're pinned down under constant fire even in between those attacks.
Yes.
Is that correct to say?
I would say that's a good assumption. Now, they did have some skirmishers that were left behind rocks. They just didn't retreat.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems is now that you can see it.
Yeah.
You know, the beauty of what's going on
Right.
Culp's Hill right now is you're clearing the woods out.
Right.
So you stand at the Union line, you can look right down into the swell all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
So if you try and run away, you're more of a target.
Right.
So a lot of the Confederates will go to ground. They're within, 50 yards of the Union line or less. When they were doing the archaeology over there, I was over there helping them out. I actually dug up some bullets, under adult supervision, of course.
Yeah.
But anyway, they had the white flags where the bullets, where they
Yes.
found them, and there was a whole line of white flags just behind where the Brady or Forbes rock is, and they were dropped. So that's where the Confederates fell back to.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
that's
the-
what I thought.
And
So
the
it's
Forbes
about-
rock is 40 yards from the Greens rocks, Greens line.
Yeah.
And that's not more than
so
40
they're-
yards away
they're
from the
pinned down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in that case, if you're a Confederate, going backward might be as dangerous as going
It
forward.
could be worse.
Yeah.
It could be worse because when the battle ends and the Confederates realize they can't go forward, can't go back, they're going to capture a lot of Confederates out there because they can't leave because they're pinned down.
The other thing too that struck me is like that famous Forbes sketch.
Yes.
That of course, and apparently some of this rehabilitation work is based on those things. But
Yes.
but here's the thing: if my question is, if you're an artist and you're making that sketch, if you make your sketch too wooded, you wouldn't be able to see the soldiers in the picture.
Right.
So my thing is, it seems to me we'd be better off going more by the photographs,
Right.
as opposed to that sketch. That
Sure.
sketch makes it look like it's so open.
Yeah.
And I feel like the artist had to do that so you could actually see
the men?
the troops.
Yeah, it's a possibility. Though the photographic evidence is pretty close to that.
Okay.
Especially the one on the breastworks.
Right.
There
yeah.
you look down the trees, you can really see through the woods. Yeah, so I don't think he's too far off.
Too far off, okay.
But I think it is probably a little more open.
I always felt like the photographs that I'm seeing of Culp Hill tend to show somewhat more trees at the time than what that sketch does.
Yeah, and part of the problem is when you see those photographs right after the battle, it looks like there's brush. Yes. And those are the limbs shot off the trees.
True, yeah.
So
a good point.
Yeah, now, so I read an account, and I don't remember enough of it to try to paraphrase it, but I read an account that was talking about the limbs on the tree. Like, you got to worry about bullets hitting you and limbs falling on your head.
Yes.
And especially when the Confederate artillery was still able to fire into, like, I guess that would be on the second. Just the trees that you have to, like, you never really think of that until you.
Am I misremembering this, Charlie? Is there not an account of I think it's either Greene or Kane's brigade? Somebody talks about like the upper half of a tree trunk going through one of the guys in their company. Like it got taken off by a shell and landed vertically through.
I think some canes.
Yeah, that sounds really familiar to me up there.
Yeah.
God, can you imagine?
Well, when the cannonball hits a tree, it shatters it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you can be killed by wood splinters.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
The worst place to be in an artillery barrage is in the woods.
Right.
Really, which is why Pickett's men weren't in the woods.
Right.
Only one regiment. The rest of them are in the open field in front of that wood line.
Oh, speaking of which, the Union artillery on the upper summit, was it Kinsey? Or
it was it would be Knapp.
Okay.
And
Did the accounts suggest that those Union artillerymen actually removed trees in front of them for their field of fire, or that it was so that the hill was less dense enough that they didn't have to remove trees, or did they just blast through them?
There was one account I came across, and I can't find it now. So it's lost in my files. But where they did actually cut down some trees for fields of fire.
Okay.
Greene has, there's accounts on Greene's front where they cut trees down in front of his line for abatis.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, Greene, in February of 1863, required one man per company in each regiment to show up to inspection with entrenching tool. So it'd be a shovel, an axe, a pick.
So they were prepared.
So he had essentially a small engineering corps with him that they could do that. They could dig, they could cut, they could alter the terrain to some degree. Okay.
So is this just coincidence then that particular brigade ended up on the upper summit of Culp Hill?
Or was that? It's coincidence.
It's coincidence.
It really is.
Okay.
But what a lucky coincidence.
I was going to say, that's a pretty darn lucky coincidence.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
All right, so they let's bring Culp Hill to a close then, because there's a lot more to get to.
Sure.
So basically, what ends it? Just a failure to achieve the goals?
Well, the final assault around 10:30, when that fails, the Confederates kind of realize, that's it. We can't take the hill. It's too, and they start to withdraw.
Okay.
Now they're going to leave some skirmishers there, keep the Union heads down, that sort of thing. But for the most part, they're starting to pull most of their men back because they're still under artillery fire.
Right.
So they're getting them across Rock Creek. There were some Union attempts to try and see if they were still there, and they got shot at because they left some skirmishers behind. But certainly by the afternoon, early afternoon, or late afternoon, the Confederate presence on Culp Hill is much reduced.
So where do they pull back to? Do they go to the other side of Benner's Hill on the Hanover Road, or are they more on the other side of Rock Creek, just in the woods?
Yes. I answered
Both?
that question, yes. Some went over to the other side where they're reforming. But you're going to leave some along Rock Creek, obviously, in case the Union get aggressive. Okay, so you don't want them interfering with you, because you've already been pretty well spent.
Right.
Johnson's division, minus missing, suffers pretty much the same as Pickett's does in the Battle of Gettysburg. Pickett, of course, had more missing than Johnson. But, the killed and the wounded are fairly comparable. It took Pickett 50 minutes to do it. It took Johnson 10 hours. So there's a little difference there.
Yeah. Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
But that's what they're doing.
Okay, so while all of that's going on throughout the morning, What's Lee doing?
I would suggest he's hoping.
Reassessing?
Lee, at this
Right.
point, realizes his original battle plan is scrapped. So he's starting to form an alternative. This is when he starts, this is the beginning of the thought process that's going to produce Pickett's charge.
Okay.
He's trying to figure out, okay, what can we do now? And eventually he gets Longstreet. They go out, supposedly in front of the skirmish line. Mm-hmm. They got in front of the skirmish line. They stand 20, social distancing.
Yeah.
Okay. So they stand apart, right? They stand apart. You stand over there.
Yeah.
I'll stand over here. I'll yell at you and you yell at me, and they won't hear us.
Right.
Okay. So basically, they just didn't want to attract attention.
Sure.
And he's trying to explain to Longstreet what he wants him to do, and Longstreet is telling him it can't be done.
Right.
And there was one account where Lee went back and got some of the soldiers and brought them out there and showed them what he wants them to do. And he said, do you think you can do it? And they said, oh, yeah, we could do that.
What are they going to say to General?
Really. And then when he got back, the one guy asked the other guy, you think we can do that? He says, I wouldn't give you 2 bits for our lives if we go across that field. But if that old man asked me to, I'm going.
Wow.
Okay, so so that's what Lee's doing. He's trying to figure out what he can do if the attack on Culp's Hill fails, which it does.
Okay.
So he's orchestrating or organizing an alternate plan.
So the Lee's plan for Culp's Hill, just rewinding, was to attack.
Yes.
It's just the Union troops or the Union artillery foiled that plan.
Yeah. Well, the point, what they foiled, in my opinion, okay, the attack was made regardless of the artillery.
True.
Fire. But what they foiled is that Lee would probably have called the attack off knowing that Longstreet wasn't ready.
Okay.
But the artillery fire prevented him from doing that.
Gotcha.
Okay, so when the artillery fired, it's out of his hands.
Okay.
I mean, the die is cast, as Julius Caesar once said.
Then it just escalates out of control.
Yeah, it does. So that to me is why the artillery fire was a significant factor in the Confederate, shall we say, plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so when Slocum says, "Let's drive them out at daylight," or whatever he says, that mentality sets into motion that whole chain of events.
It does. It really does. Yeah, because Ewell's not going to be able to sit there and do nothing.
Right.
The Union are going to hit him.
Yeah.
If he doesn't hit them, they're going to hit him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So then, what does he decide to do now with Longstreet? What's Longstreet's objective for the day?
The angle.
The angle.
Yes.
Now, how does that? Did he always want to do that? Like from the early morning, he said, "I want to attack the center." Or
I think Lee had planned maybe more for the attack to hit between the Pennsylvania Monument and the copse of trees, because that's a lower slope,
right
there, and eventually, when it's just Pickett and friends, he's looking at an angle on a stone wall.
Okay.
And that's what he's indicating to Longstreet. I think from when they were out there in the fields talking about what they're going to do.
So Longstreet has orders now to have Pickett's division attack that area. And how do Pettigrew and Trimble get involved in this as well?
Okay. Well, Pettigrew and Trimble's going to take over Pender's division. Pender gets hit on the 2nd, as we know. So Trimble's running around bugging Lee about a command, basically. And so with the lack of senior officers, even Harry Heath doesn't know who he is yet.
Right.
So you're going to take Trimble and give him what's left of Pender's division. The ones that are going to, and Pettigrew, of course, is taking over for Harry. Remember, he got hit in the head.
Right.
And he said, "I will not talk about Gettysburg because I don't remember it." That's in his memoirs, which is why his memoirs aren't more popular, because they all want to know what about Gettysburg.
Right.
And he doesn't remember.
How convenient.
Yeah. And so these guys, especially Pettigrew, which was Heath's division, was resting on July 2nd. They're in Hospital Woods, opposite the golf course, and they're licking their wounds. And so Lee reasoned, okay, these guys had a day off.
Right, okay.
So we'll add them to the attack. And 2 brigades of Pender's division weren't heavily involved, so we'll add them. Okay. And then Pickett, and we'll put in Wilcox. Perry, Lang's brigade, the Floridians, and Wilcox, Alabamians. Okay, and that'll be the main assaulting column.
Okay.
Okay, and so that's what Lee's doing, and he's also organized getting artillery up for the prelude to the charge.
Right.
So he's a busy guy.
He's busy. Yeah. He's got a lot going on.
He does.
And this is all, he's all putting this together as the fighting on Culp's Hill is going on.
Absolutely.
Yes. Has to be,
Longstreet, does he like this idea? Is he for it?
It's clear that he has grave reservations, to say the least.
You're too kind.
Yeah, exactly, to say the least. But to get back to your original question, to put together an assault like that, obviously Lee had to have realized, even, I guess, maybe by mid-morning, that something else has to be done.
Right.
By mid-morning, I think he already sees the die is cast in Culp's Hill.
Right.
You know, not only are we not taking more of Culp's Hill, but we're end up losing, you know, the part of the hill they gained the previous evening.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Do we have any idea? How far can we narrow that down as to when Lee makes that transition from strictly a Culp's Hill to, okay, now we're going all out towards the Union Center? I think it's got to be by mid-morning.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's before the fighting ends.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be before the fighting ends in Culp's Hill.
Yeah.
You know, to plan something of that magnitude against the Union Center.
Okay, so they start getting everything in order. The bombardment, talk about that a little bit.
Okay, go.
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, the idea was for the artillery, primarily Lee's concerned about artillery on Cemetery Hill. For obvious reasons, it covers that
fields
whole
of fire in
fields
multiple
of fire,
direction,
and his men will be enfiladed as they get closer to the Union line from the fire there. So the idea was to get the guns in such a position that they would render that hill untenable for artillery.
Okay,
and they have the advantage because when you look at the Union line as a fishhook, we always say about how the advantage is they have a concentric line.
Right.
You can move back and forth easily. But the Confederates have an external line which they can put fire in. You know, from different. Yeah.
That's an important factor because from where the Confederate artillery is, almost anywhere in the field, you're going to hit something that's Union in there one way or another.
Exactly.
You know,
you're surrounding
exactly.
Yeah.
Almost. And the ground too. You know that they took. Lee said in his report, the ground gained on the Union left on July 2nd gave us an artillery position, which we believe with the proper concert of action, that we could take the heights beyond.
Right.
Okay, and the ground he gained on the Union left on July 2nd is Sickles' line at the Emmitsburg Road and the Peach Orchard.
And when you throw that in there, that ground, and then look at the guns even firing from Benner's Hill, the Confederates possibly have artillery fire from almost 270 degrees.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's...
Yeah, they're shooting almost completely around the Union line.
Right.
Yeah.
Big deal.
And the artillery fire from Sickles' line on July 2nd, now with artillery from the Confederacy, is actually kind of enfilading the Union position. They're not shooting over it; they're shooting almost up it.
Yes.
And if you miss,
if you miss what you're aiming at, you're going to hit somebody on the other side.
There are more men killed on Culp's Hill by artillery fire in the afternoon of July 3rd. Than on any of the other times.
Because it's coming behind them.
Yeah, they're going over. Yeah.
Well, it's just kind of makes me step back a little bit in a bigger picture. One of the things that makes July 3rd so fascinating is that I cannot think of another day in the U.S. Civil War when you had such intensity of fighting among the three different military arms, artillery, cavalry, and infantry. I mean, there's certainly many battles where the ferocity of the infantry fighting rivals Gettysburg.
Right.
There's certainly many cavalry battles like Brandy Station.
Bigger than what we had here.
We had here.
Yeah.
But can you think of another day in the U.S. Civil War when all three arms, cavalry, artillery, and infantry, are in such severe, intense fighting, prolonged, among all three arms?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
it's a good point. Very good point.
I can't think of another day like that.
It is a big day. Well, so you mentioned the cavalry, and I know that nobody seems to be really sure if, in relation to the bombardment, when the Stuart-Custer fight went on East Cavalry Field, was it before? Was it at the same time? Was it a little bit after? And with Pickett's charge, the whole thing. But sometime around this time, this was going on. So before we get to the charge itself, let's pause from the bombardment and go over to East Cavalry Field for a bit and set that up. Okay. First of all, I remember I used to come here when I was younger, and we would take the bus tour with the stereo, dramatized in stereo.
Yeah. Dixie played a lot.
Yeah.
Played Dixie a lot.
Yeah.
I love that too. I love Dixie.
There is no time.
So they used to say that on the recording that Stuart was supposed to go around the flank and pierce the Union center from behind, and while Pickett was hitting them, in the front. Of course, I've never heard anybody else say that, but this is what was on this dramatized in stereo thing. Now, I was listening to this in the late 90s, early 2000s, but from the quality of it, it sounded like it was probably recorded in the 60s. So I mean, it was like, it reminded me of like The Wonderful World of Disney. It had that same kind of feel to it.
Right.
But anyway, my point is, let's put that to rest, can we? It was that, or maybe not put it to rest. Was that the plan?
It's going to be difficult to put to rest because that theory has been advanced by others over the years. I don't buy it.
I don't either.
It just, the evidence is not there to support it.
Right.
In my mind at all.
Do we know what was Stuart ordered to do?
Well, I believe what his purpose out there is, he is to operate in such a manner that if what we call Pickett's charge breaks through the center of the Union line and causes a rout and causes the Union Army to retreat off the field, that he will be then in a position to exploit any Union retreat.
Right.
Cutting supply lines, capturing prisoners, and causing havoc to a potential Union retreat.
Because if the Union cavalry isn't out in his way, he can get to the Baltimore Pike by going that way, correct?
He could conceivably get there, but logistically he would have to how is he going to attack the back slopes of Cemetery Ridge? He would have to make his way through a myriad of Union forces.
But if Pickett is successful and the Union Army is retreating,
falls back off the field,
then he can hit them on the Baltimore Pike.
Then he's in a position to somewhere, exploit that breakthrough.
Right.
Yes. But
that is very fanciful to me. That sounds like a pipe dream.
Like Charlie, you have a whole line of Union artillery along the Baltimore Pike that would be there to stop it.
Yeah.
You have other Union troops. Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
You have
the Union Artillery Reserve back there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How's he going to get past all that?
It kind of depends on,
just gonna push into it.
Two things. He's either going to come up the Baltimore Pike and somehow cut his way through the 6th Corps to attack the rear, or he's going to sit on the Baltimore Pike and wait for the remnants of 7 full infantry corps
to run them over.
Who are they're gonna give up because there's a couple hundred cavalrymen sitting there. I don't think that's going to happen.
No,
unfortunately, that is a notion that's hard to dispel among average visitors.
And it's always it's like the same thing as letting Hood go around to the right. It's the answer is always that 6th Corps. They're always back there.
There's a lot of people hanging around in the back.
Right. That's a lot of guys.
Yes.
Well, there's a West Pointer by the name of Cahart who wrote a book, Lee's Real Plan, and he contends that.
That was the plan.
It's a West Point. Guys from West Point graduate. I had him on the tour. And I couldn't dispel him of the notion.
No, I've heard of that book too.
I have a copy of it. But anyway, so getting back to what John said, I mean, it's been advanced more recently by a number of people, and credible people. I mean, guys, military guy.
But how? No, I mean, I am by no means an expert on any of this, but just how would he be able to do that, or not how would he be able to do it? I know how he would be able to do it, but I guess the problem is, as he would find out, is that there's Union cavalry in his way.
Right.
And let's say he defeated them, but still doesn't mean he'd be able to go easily to the Baltimore Pike.
Exactly.
So there'd be remnants of them probably still there, and then now that would be the Union Army would be alerted that there's some trouble over there, so something would be moved over there to counter him. How does the West Pointer think that?
The notion seems to be based on another notion that Meade will do nothing if that happens.
Right.
That somehow they're going to just allow.
Meade's like everybody else that they face.
They're just going to allow this to happen. And the entire 6th Corps and all the Union artillery and the Union Artillery Reserve is just going to not fire a shot and allow him to prance by them and strike the Union rear.
The only thing we know for sure, is that Lee strongly recommended that if he can gain the Baltimore Pike, he should do so. That's where it ends.
Okay.
And there was never an order for him to attack the rear of the Union Army from the Baltimore Pike.
Okay, sure.
If you find that, then you can find Atlantis.
Yeah.
Okay? And when you do, I want to see it. Okay?
Right.
Because that's never mentioned. One of the other things that you need to consider, which I think Lee was considering, Stuart's trying to get the cavalry off the back of Ewell.
Yeah.
Okay? Because Ewell's supposed to make an attack. And he's got the enemy in front of him and the enemy behind him.
Right.
And Lee's smart enough to realize, well, that's almost like, Mission Impossible before Tom Cruise.
Right.
You just don't do it. So I think that's part of the plan. But then he said, if you can gain the Baltimore Pike, I think you should do so.
Right.
But I think the primary purpose was to get Stuart,
distract the enemy.
Well, get him involved with the cavalry so that you don't have to use Confederate infantry to do so.
Right.
This might be a moot point had those Confederate brigades participated in the attack on July 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but they're out there doing Stuart's jobs. Actually, Billy Smith's Stonewall Brigade.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So Lee's saying get out there and get that cavalry off Ewell's back.
Yeah. Earn a reason for me to keep those stars on your collar.
Well, I don't think he said that, but
he said, I told you there is no time for that.
There's no time.
Veronica's rolling her eyes.
Okay.
So he's going out there. He's got to take that now, and that to go back to July 2nd. I'm sorry, the evening of July 1st, and we're jumping back here. Ooh. But Ewell is told that there are Union troops out on his left at the end of the day.
Yes.
Okay. I think it's Williams. It ends up being
Williams, part of his division. Yes.
Right, and so he can't. I mean, if he's going to try to take that hill if practicable, right? He's got to worry about his back.
Yes,
exactly.
Because when he faces that hill to take it, now he's got to worry about what's coming behind him, which is where Williams would be coming from. So it's the same principle here.
This is one of the reasons why the absence of Stuart up to that point is so crucial.
Yeah,
because it's not just a lack of intelligence of Union movements, but once the battle is joined, you see consistently throughout the first and second day that Confederate infantry has to be deployed to do the cavalry
to protect
role.
The flanks. Yeah,
I mean, not to get off subject, but imagine on the second day if there's several hundred more Confederates in the attack against Little Round Top.
Yeah.
But they're not all there because some of them are south of there, essentially screening their own flank.
Right.
And you see that out here, like Charlie said, in the easterns, to the east of Gettysburg.
The second day
and
the
second day. And the third day.
And you've got infantry guarding the trains back in Chambersburg.
I mean, can you imagine the attack on Culp's Hill in the evening of the 2nd if the Stonewall Brigade had been involved?
Right.
But they're not involved because they're out along the Hanover Pike skirmishing against Union cavalry.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so good. So, Stu, I like this idea that Stuart's out there to take the cavalry off of Ewell.
Okay.
I like that. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
And if Stuart is going to threaten the Baltimore Pike in any way on the 3rd, he has to control the intersection of the Hanover Road and the Low Dutch Road.
Right.
He does.
And that's one of the
Low
reasons
Dutch Road is going to take him right to the Baltimore Pike.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons that intersection becomes so crucial. So.
Right, and that's the area of East Cavalry Field.
It is.
So he now the thing is though about this, Stuart is trying to take the pressure of the cavalry off of Ewell by the time he gets out there, correct me if I'm wrong, Ewell's done fighting, correct? Or is it roughly around the same time?
He's fighting when he leaves.
Right.
So when he starts moving, the fight for Culp Hill is still going on.
Going on. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Okay.
But by the time he engages, it's over. Yeah.
Okay. So what happens out on East Cavalry Field then?
Well, I think if you read Stuart's official report, he seems to indicate now ultimately those cavalry attacks, the Confederate cavalry attacks, will occur roughly from a north to south direction. But as the battle engages and goes on, of course, they're occurring to the east side of what we call Cress Ridge.
Yeah.
But if you read Stuart's official report, it seems to indicate that wasn't the way he wanted that to go. It seems like what he wants to do is he's going to set up a line of skirmishers along Cress Ridge into the east of it, and he wants to attack with his cavalry from the north to the south, but on the west side of Cress Ridge.
Okay.
I think he's trying to cleave the Union cavalry away from their infantry supports, for starters. Now, the way that develops, one of the ways that develops, though, and I always found this fascinating, is that this is a situation where I think the initial skirmishing out there in East Cavalry Field is crucial. When we think of initial skirmishing, we just think of, well, that's just something that leads up to the big show.
Right.
But in this case, what happens is, as Jenkins' brigade, of course, Jenkins has been wounded by this time, but as Jenkins' brigade is out there skirmishing, and then the skirmishing escalates, the 5th Michigan Cavalry on the Union side gets into the fray as dismounted skirmishers. Now, the significance of that is the 5th Michigan Cavalry has Spencer rifles. Not Spencer carbines, Spencer rifles. And in quick order, or fairly quick, they start to overpower Jenkins' skirmishers. And this, I think, actually causes Stuart to change his entire plan.
Okay.
Because now, as his skirmish line is giving away, Stuart orders mounted attacks to move from the north to the south, but on the east side, that is the Hanover side of Cress Ridge, and then the fighting escalates from there. So in a very odd way, I think the presence of those Spencer rifles with the 5th Michigan actually is pretty crucial to the way the whole thing works out, because that causes Stuart's skirmish line to give way and changes his whole attack plan out there. And then things just, next thing you know, you have mounted charges on both sides going back and forth. So
and so that's interesting. Yeah. The Spencers. So the mounted charges you mentioned, get into that.
Well, of course, this is where George Armstrong Custer will be paramount, and his troops. Custer will personally lead 2 separate mounted charges, one by the 7th Michigan, one by the 1st Michigan. Well, as it turns out then, that cavalry fighting will escalate into some of the worst cavalry fighting in the war.
Yeah.
Of course, there will be countercharges made by both sides. When it's all said and done, like a lot of cavalry fights in the Civil War, you could argue it's inconclusive, but both sides somewhat claim victory.
Right.
Now, I think the preponderance of weight of the evidence would say, well, the Union Army accomplished more what they needed to do in that sense.
Who left the field first?
Who left the field first? I guess my instinct would be it would be Stuart.
Yeah.
It would have to be Stuart. So and it's funny, I never really thought about something that in that fundamental way, but it's got to be Stuart. It has to be Stuart.
So then
because the Union Army still controls the Low Dutch Road intersection. So
Stuart.
So Stuart.
Now, Custer wasn't supposed to be there in the first place.
Right.
Talk
exactly.
about that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because he was supposed to go over and join Farnsworth.
Because he's not part of Greg's division.
No, he's not.
Part of Kilpatrick's division.
No,
right.
and
Why is he over there in the first place?
Well, he was on the Low Dutch Road. They fought at Hunterstown. And he's coming back from there and coming down there. And Farnsworth was down around 2 taverns, and it was ordered on the morning of the 3rd to go over to the left. You know, one of the real problems that the Union had was that Buford's men were allowed to go to Westminster to refit on the morning of the 2nd. And Meade signed off on that when Pleasanton requested it, but told him, you need to replace them.
Right.
And so as far as Kilpatrick's division's coming up, this is what Pleasanton does. He tells him to get over there, and he doesn't get there till the 3rd. So this
tells Custer to get over to
tells Kilpatrick. And then Farnsworth makes the move and goes over. As Custer's getting ready to leave, Gregg is aware that there's a significant force of cavalry, and he got this intelligence from Cemetery Hill. Howard's headquarters sees a column of Confederate cavalry headed in that direction, and so he goes to Custer, and he says, you know, I only have one brigade here. My other brigade's strung out in the skirmish line connecting to the Union infantry position, so I only have one brigade that I could use, and there's 3 or more brigades of Confederate cavalry headed in my direction. Do you mind staying? I could use you. And Custer looks at him and says, if you order me to do it, I'll do it. He's not even under his command.
Right.
And so that's how Custer
wants to be there.
He
sees it shaping up.
Yeah, it's shaping up as a pretty good affair there. And that's how Custer remains there in the first place.
Now, you say that Gregg's other brigade is strung out between the Union infantry and
East Cavalry Field. Where his other brigade
So what, the Union right?
That would be the Union right, And if you go drive along like Highland Avenue, you can see 16th Pennsylvania.
16th Pennsylvania, So that brigade is stretched out that whole way.
Yes, they're providing.
That's a pretty good distance.
It is, but they're cavalry.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Still a big distance.
They have horses. But that's he only has one brigade he could use as a mobile counter.
Sure.
And that's why I asked Custer. Custer's got the biggest brigade in the Union cavalry.
Okay.
The Michigan brigade's the largest.
How many does he have?
Well, it's well over 2,000, almost 3,000. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, some of them are fairly new.
Because, the 5th and 6th Michigan are big regiments. They're big regiments at that point.
No, okay, so he charges, what did you say, with the 5th first or the 7th?
No, as far as the mounted charge, the 5th Michigan was, what I'd mentioned was part of the force that was engaged in the dismounted skirmishing line with their Spencer rifles. Now, as far as the actual mounted charges by the Union, it would have been the 7th Michigan and then the 1st Michigan. The 7th Michigan initial charge led by Custer is not as successful as hoped, but the charge by the 1st Michigan, along with the ensuing reinforcements that come in then, is what enables the Union Army to take the day out there.
But he's charging these single regiments into a single Confederate regiment or several? Because if I recall, looking at a map, it looks like Stuart has the regiments stacked, and he's charging right into them with one regiment.
And bear in mind, this is where farmers' fences really play a big impact.
Big role.
Because although a lot of forces out there are on the field, so to speak, they cannot all be deployed in a single mounted charge the way they would hope to be because of the hindrance of those fences. So that's a big factor.
Okay. So then that's why Stuart has them stacked one in front of the other, is what you're saying? Or
when you say stacked one in front,
I mean, like instead of a battle line.
Okay. In other words, yes. In some cases, they have to move in column to make their way through fences before they can even mount an assault.
I don't have the map in front of me. I don't remember if it's in the Leno book or not. But whatever map I was looking at, it was showing Custer charging with either the 1st or the 7th. I'm not sure which one it was at this point, but into basically just a stack of Confederate regiments. So he might knock the first one out, but he's got like 3 or 4 more. I forgot how many it was.
Well, part of this mounted charge escalates because they're trying to support their skirmishers.
Right, exactly.
And so when
so they're occupied by the Confederates are occupied by the skirmishers.
Essentially. They're going to send in the mounted charge because of the Michigan's got the upper hand.
This is an oversimplification, but when the Michigan and other Union skirmishers begin to get the better of the Confederate skirmishers, Stuart then sends in mounted attacks to support his own skirmishers.
This is what I'm thinking. I'm confusing parts here.
And then once those Confederate initial mounted attacks begin to get the better of the Union skirmishers, then McMurtry, Gregg, and Custer begin their own mounted attacks to support their own skirmishers.
Okay.
You don't want to lose your skirmishers.
No.
That's right.
All right, and so eventually, too, there's a couple of other regiments or maybe brigades that help on the flanks.
There are indeed.
In.
Yes. Which is
Union, I mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is where the actions which Captain William Miller of the 3rd PA is later awarded a Medal of Honor for his part in that, as that they will help strike the Confederate flank.
So there was someone there who did something conspicuous other than George Custer.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Good to know.
Big time.
All right, so the cavalry fight, we've got that out of the way there. I know Eric was suffering through that. He hates the cavalry, right, Eric?
I really was, yeah.
Yes. He actually had to leave the room.
I was weeping inside.
So now let's get back over to the infantry. Pickett's charge. Let's talk about Pickett's charge. Big deal in the movie.
Big deal.
Right? Everybody, oh my God, this is the most wonderful thing ever, so glorious and everything like that. Just in your opinions, before we get into it, what do you think about Pickett's charge? Like, I mean, in popular history versus reality, you guys know a lot more than the average bear does about Pickett's charge. You know the nitty gritty of it. What do you think?
I'm actually going to refer to something I remember you said years ago.
Okay,
it's that in American culture, for whatever reasons, we tend to be attracted to
losers,
fights against overwhelming odds, and what we perceive to be and that kind of fits in with that to some degree.
Okay.
So it is, as a result, is maybe as important as it is. It has assumed a role in our cultural psyche that is even beyond what it would normally be.
Because a fool can stand out there and hear you say, so Lee's going to order these men to go across this field. And a fool can look at you and go, are you out of here? What you talking about, Willis, is what they're going to say to you. They're going to say, who the hell would do that? So, but right away, you don't need to know anything about military, anything. You could just hear that and go, I wouldn't do that with people shooting at me. There's nothing to hide behind, you know. So maybe that's what it is that we all know it's like doomed from the start.
Well, but they didn't know that then. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. I mean, Lee didn't make that decision because he was off his rocker. He made that decision because he felt it had a reasonable chance of success, even though there would be high casualties.
But John, you've taken out tours. I've been on tours, and I've seen people who know nothing about any of this, and they just hear the setup of this thing, and they look at that field and they go, "What?"
Yes,
and they don't even know how it ends yet. This is usually like when we used to do bike tours, and I used to be able to go on them. Bob would often go to the Virginia Memorial and set up Pickett's charge, just to give you, I'm sure other people do this too.
Right.
And, I remember people looking out there and going, what? And they don't know how it ends. And then we get to the end and they cry because Bob's very good at that. He makes them cry.
Right.
But it's true. I've seen it 100 times. He's very good. But all right. So anyway, whatever. We're getting too deep in the weeds here. So what is supposed to happen? What goes on with Pickett's charge? The bombardament's over, so forget that. Take us through it.
Go ahead.
Well, the infantry's supposed to advance and break through at the angle. I always use 13,000 because no one knows.
Yeah, that's
I use 13,000 because it's unlucky. That's why I use it. Okay, the park says 12,500 because it's halfway between 10,000 and 15,000.
Right.
So if they can do that, I can do what I want.
Sure, you can make up whatever you want.
Yeah. But the point is, if you put over 6,000 men south of the angle and over 6,000 men north of the angle, then you can break the line there because angles are weak spots.
Right.
Okay, whereas Sickles line break. It breaks at the Peach Orchard.
Yeah,
it's
right,
an angle. What's
yeah.
Mead concerned about at Gettysburg? The Cemetery Hill. It's an angle.
The salient.
Yeah, salient.
Yeah.
I can't say that word, so I said an angle.
Okay. Well, that works.
Yeah,
that
so
works.
He's waiting for someone to say
I need someone to bail me out here.
It's a curved angle.
It's a salient. Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. There we go. So that... that guy. But anyway, so that's what's supposed to happen. Now, a couple of things you need to consider, no one does. They just don't do it. A couple of things you need to consider that no one does. One, that ground isn't flat.
That's exactly.
It undulates. Now, I don't know what that means, but it goes up and down, up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
There's cover in that field the average visitor doesn't see. General Lee's not an average visitor.
Right.
Okay, and if you ever walked it, now, I used to do some picket charge for the Park Service, because they had these people want to do picket charge and they didn't want to do it, so they got me to do it because I was a new guide.
Gotcha.
The new guides are always good, and so Todd Bolton, who was the guide supervisor then, showed me how he does it, and he would go over, kind of on the right flank and come up by the Spangler Farm because there the ground hasn't been altered by farming. And the undulations are much more pronounced. And they used to have that big tower.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Well, do I remember that, or have I heard of it?
Yeah, you've heard of it. You don't remember it.
No.
Okay.
Oh, you're talking about the National Tower.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I
the
remember
Space
that.
Needle.
Yeah,
the Space Needle. But anyway, you could walk over there, and you could walk down along where Armistead's line was, and it would disappear.
Exactly.
It would disappear.
Oh, yeah. As you're walking.
Because that's how bad the undulations were.
I try to bring that up with almost every first-time visitor.
Yeah.
Because I'll say if you were to walk across that ground, even the ground that has changed, there will be several areas where you will dip out of the line of sight of Union cannon.
The Confederate barn almost goes out of sight sometimes.
It does.
It does.
You just see the top.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the undulations, there's cover in the field the average visitor doesn't see. The other thing is, you get 200 and some guns fired for 2 hours. What can you see?
Yeah.
You can't see yourself. You just can't see.
Yeah.
The Union soldiers, the Confederates are going to get about a third of the way across the field before the Northerners even know they're coming.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, and I think this it goes without saying, that Lee believes that his infantry can take that position because I think he believes the Union Army's demoralized.
Okay.
He's pushing around. He won Chancellorsville and Fredericksburg.
There were even larger scale attacks than that even before that. Think of Gaines Mill.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
It's there had been frontal attacks up to that point. Some had worked, some hadn't. But it wasn't something just totally out of the blue.
It wasn't a guaranteed failure.
There was one on July 1st.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the Confederate attack on Seminary Ridge.
Yeah.
And it went up against 18 guns massed there, and it was costly.
Yeah, costly, but
it was successful.
Right.
And to be honest with you, it's not optional.
Yeah.
Lee's got to do something. He came up here to win the war.
Right.
And you don't want it, once you establish dominance over someone, you don't want to give them any reason to believe they can beat you.
Yeah.
Okay? And so he's got to do something. Pickett's division hasn't fought yet. Throw him in. Lee's a finisher.
Yeah.
The reason he wins battles is he gets his army involved. Yeah, they get involved.
Yeah.
And so I think his biggest miscalculation, and this is just, it came to me in a dream one night, was that he didn't figure that Northerners would fight as hard in the North as Southerners fought in the South.
That astounds me, though.
Yeah, I just don't think he factored in the home field advantage.
Yeah.
Because he's been benefiting from it for over a year.
Yeah.
And maybe he just assumed that the Southern soldier was more enthusiastic as a rule. I don't know.
If you read through a lot of the accounts, you'll find that throughout the campaign, it seems that the Confederate high command believes that they can move with impunity under Northern soil.
Yeah,
I mean,
arrogance.
It's arrogance, exactly.
Yeah. And now but of course now they're up against a different animal. They're up against an Army of the Potomac that is being capably led on multiple levels, from regiment to brigade to division to corps to Army command.
Yeah.
It's a whole different.
It came into its own in the last month or so.
Really, with reorganization and the federal government promoting more aggressive Union generals.
Yeah.
This is a whole different opponent than they're used to fighting now. And the fact that they are fighting to defend their own home soil certainly is big too.
Yeah. It's funny how it seems like the Army of the Potomac seems to just within the last month before the battle seemed to really just kind of click. Like everything seemed to just work. Well, of course not everything, but, but you know, like, I mean, it just seems that things fell in place. The right people were in the right positions.
Yeah.
It is interesting. All right, so the charge goes off. They start advancing across the field. For the people who are still new to all this stuff, when the bombardment's over, the Confederates get up on their feet. They get in line. They start moving across. Naturally, they're moving across with no problems at all, right? It's not until they get to the wall where they run into any problems. Isn't that correct?
Well, they're going to take incidental casualties.
They take artillery fire.
What's this? Okay, explain this, please, then. Okay. So they come out. So artillery fire. So that's the first thing that they're going to encounter when they come out.
Right.
Then is there any kind of obstacle along the way that's going to make it difficult for them to get straight to the wall without it stopping or anything?
Well, there's some fences up, but most of them were taken down on the second day.
Yeah.
But how about
the fences? I think it's fair to say that the fences that are within their own skirmish lines are obviously all removed.
Down.
Of course, the problem becomes the potential fences that are inside Union control of their skirmish lines.
And so along the Emmitsburg Road, there's some fences, correct?
Mm-hmm. The ones that matter, I think, are more towards town.
Right.
They would be in front of Pettigrew and Trimble because the Confederates controlled the Emmitsburg Road after July 2nd.
And also
it's the southern end.
Did they control it? The southern end? Yeah, but they didn't control it around the Cadore farm, did they?
No, but they crossed there on the 2nd.
Right.
Wright's
so
brigade.
So Wright's brigade took them down.
Yeah. Or at least took some.
Or some of them.
I was just going to say, because the Emmitsburg Road doesn't run exactly due north and south, it angles from towards the northeast towards the southwest, which means that Pettigrew and Trimble are going to encounter Union fire even before they reach the Emmitsburg Road.
Exactly.
Whereas Pickett is not going to encounter Union rifle fire until after he crosses the Emmitsburg Road.
Right.
So because of the angle of that road, the fence lines take a whole different dimension depending on what part of the attack you're on, I think.
So for Pettigrew and that column there, do the fences slow them down? And like you mentioned that they're under fire before they get to
the Emmitsburg Road.
Right.
Yeah.
Those that do get, how many of them do get to the fence?
Oh boy!
Or, not how many like men, but how many?
Okay.
How much of the total force? Like a brigade, 2 brigades, regiment or 2.
Well, 1 brigade doesn't make it at all.
Right,
that would be
Brockenbrough. Because he's getting hammered with 30-some guns from Cemetery Hill, and so his men go to ground.
Right.
Not long after they step off the ridge. Now that puts Davis on the end. His men are going to make the wall. Lane's going to make the wall. So most of the Confederate brigades, other than Brockenbrough, are going to have elements that get, if not to the wall, very close to it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We know that Wilcox and Lang, the Florida Brigade, are going to take a different angle. They're not going to come in with Pickett. They're going to go straight towards McGilvery's line because they know there's artillery there. So they're going to go to ground out in front of the Pennsylvania Monument somewhere.
So I'm sorry. So you've moved
from one flank to another.
From one flank to the
other.
other. So it's the flanks that are the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And as those flanks dissolve, of course, it makes the Union Army a more efficient killing machine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because now they're concentrating more of their fire onto a smaller front.
Yes. Okay.
And it just
that's a good point.
And I think there's I don't know. I mean, I've never been in a war, so I can't say, but I think there'd be a natural tendency that if you're taking flank fire, you're going to try to move away from it.
Yeah.
And as those troops start to funnel more towards the center, towards the general vicinity of the angle, again, it heightens the Union Army as a killing machine, even if they hadn't intended to do so.
Yeah.
But you say that I haven't been in a war either, but I remember as a kid I was in Boy Scouts and we were doing we went on a camping trip and it was around Halloween, and the older Boy Scouts did a haunted trail, whatever. And I remember at one point someone jumped out in front of us, and I was like, But then someone, as I'm walking, jumped out from the side, and I saw him only in my periphery, and it scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And so you're right. Like, if something's coming out from the side and you can't see it directly, it's scary because you don't know what the hell it is.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I think you're right. Eric has been in combat. Eric, how does it feel to get hit in the flank?
I wouldn't know.
Oh, Eric always protected his flanks.
I never let anybody get around the side of me.
There you go.
That's the first. Now, another thing to consider. Okay, we're talking about fences. Okay, look at this. Look at the First Massachusetts Monument.
Yes.
What's a guy doing on it?
Hide him behind a fence.
No, he's kicking it down.
Yeah, that's right.
Kicking it down.
I forgot.
Wait,
yeah,
where's
you're
the
right.
First Massachusetts?
It's along
Right
the
on
Emmitsburg Road.
It's a big
Along
diamond.
the Emmitsburg Road.
It's by the Rogers Farm.
That's a beautiful monument,
That's
by the way.
absolutely awesome. So when Pickett's, or excuse me, when Sickles' men moved out to the Emmitsburg Road, they're tearing the fences down. The Confederates don't have to.
Right.
I mean,
so Sickles did it.
We have.
He does all kinds of stuff.
Sickles made it easier.
We have accounts of Confederates who are practically swearing at the damn Pennsylvania farmers because their fences are just too sturdy. They can't be removed quickly enough.
Yeah. Too well seated.
Yeah.
And I think the fences that caused Pickett concern were more towards the Union line, like you said. They were inside the Union skirmish line.
Sure.
And the Confederates
because you can't tear down a fence because if you have to. I mean, they would have to push back the Union skirmishers first to do it.
So I don't think the fences that slowed Pickett down were along the Emmitsburg Road.
Okay.
You know, like everybody thinks they are.
Yeah.
I think they were closer to the Union position once they crossed the Emmitsburg Road.
Aha. Okay.
Now, the fences along the Emmitsburg Road that slowed them down were in front of Pettigrew and Trimble.
Got it. Okay. Because that's way too close to the Union line.
And the Confederates didn't get that far in the second.
Right.
They didn't get much past the Bliss Farm.
And that would make sense because on the second day, as you noted, there was significantly much heavier combat to the southern end of the battlefield.
Exactly.
So those fences would tend to be the ones that would be either destroyed or removed by that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
So do you happen to know in that field in front of like the 111th New York and the 12th New Jersey?
Yes.
12th New Jersey and like that whole section of the wall there. I mean, between the wall and the Emmitsburg Road is not very far.
No.
And so anybody that got over that fence, were they either wounded, killed, or captured, or turned around? And I mean, that had to be a killing field right in front of there.
They got close. You got to remember the 12th New Jersey has smoothbores.
But they're probably buck and ball, aren't they?
Yeah, but they wait till they cross the road before they open fire.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of them, there were Confederates captured in the barn.
Yes.
The Bryan barn there that were, once again, they couldn't retreat. And they couldn't go forward, so they ran in the barn and found that wooden barns don't stop lead bullets. And then they were trying to surrender. They kept coming out around to try and surrender and get shot at. So supposedly one of the guys took the broken flagstaff and put a white cloth on it, was waving it around the barn until they could come down and surrender. The 11th Mississippi had 37 men captured unharmed. And that was right at that barn.
Right. And 53 made it back to the line, right?
Yeah.
And you're suggesting that 37 was largely because of the cover of the barn.
Yeah,
they took cover of the
they took cover in the barn rather than get shot.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. That makes sense.
And so
because that would be probably the only way to get out of there unharmed.
Some got up to the wall, and then they're standing there looking around, and all they see are Union soldiers. And supposedly one of the northern guys in New Jersey stuck his hand out and said, "Johnny Reb, now would be a damn good time to rejoin the Union." And so he helped them over the wall.
There's another one who is that the story of the flag bearer?
No, that's a different one.
That's a different one.
Yeah.
Somebody says to him, "Come over to this side of the Lord."
That was the 14th Connecticut.
Yes.
Yeah. I forget the regiment that Confederate. Could be the
26th North
Could
Carolina?
be the 26th, yeah.
I thought it was the 26th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come over here to the right side of the Lord. The 14th Connecticut took 6 battle flags.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. How many battle flags were captured after Pickett's charge?
I don't know. It's 20, almost 30.
I think
29, 27,
somewhere around there.
Yeah. It's the largest haul of Confederate battle flags until Appomattox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it was a lot.
And how many of them did Alexander Hayes drag behind his horse?
All of them.
Oh, yeah.
They made a dust cloud. That's right. You can see the dust in Virginia. I don't know. That's a good question. I always thought it was at least one or two, I think is what he was dragging.
It's like a wildly varying number.
I know. The more we tell it, the more it'll drag.
Yeah,
That's right.
So they retreat or fall back or get out of there. It's over. Some men are captured. Armistead is mortally wounded. Kemper is wounded, but not mortally.
They thought he was.
They thought, yes. They thought it.
Yeah. And Garnett is killed.
He's missing.
Yes.
Oh, that's right.
He never recovered
He
his
never
body.
recovered his body.
Yes.
He never recovered his body.
And how many colonels in Pickett's division were down?
Wasn't it all 13?
All 13.
I think it was all 13.
Or at least it was all 13. I think it was
all 13.
Yeah.
All right. And then Pickett went in with how many men?
Was it
6,500?
No.
I don't think it was quite
56. 56?
56?
I think sometimes I rounded up to 6,000.
Do you? Yeah.
Okay, it's to 6,000.
I think it's over 5,500, somewhere between there and 6,000.
And he lost over 50% of them?
60%.
60%.
Yeah.
What a day for him.
Yeah.
Okay, so then obviously the Confederates, they're heading back to Seminary Ridge. They're in complete disarray. Mead says, all right, boys, get him, right?
No.
What?
Yeah. No, I think practically he doesn't want to make the same mistake going in the other direction that he's seen.
And also
Lee
maybe he and his men are kind of tuckered.
Exactly.
They just fought.
And to mount a counter, I mean, that takes time logistically to put that together.
Yeah,
you
sure.
just don't do
just
that.
Up and go.
Yeah.
He said, we're not playing the game of stone walls anymore, boys.
I like that.
Yeah, that's what he told his staff when they said, we ought to go get him. And what he realized was the Confederates have a stone wall, too.
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, and they have all that artillery sitting over there.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't have a lot of distance ammunition, but they got plenty of canister.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And Anderson's division hasn't been deployed. We get back to what we were talking about before. Anderson was supposed to advance if the charge was successful.
Right.
So he was the reserve that was, and he was actually ordered forward, and Longstreet stopped him because he realized that
No point in
going.
Yeah.
No point in going. So Anderson's division is really able and ready to repulse any attack that the Union might advance at that point. Meade is trying, I think, to work around. You know, he rides down towards Little Round Top, and I think he's trying to find troops that are going to try and flank the Confederate Army. He doesn't want to go directly across the field, right? Because he was at Fredericksburg.
Right.
If you weren't in Fredericksburg, you don't understand why.
Yeah.
But if you were, you understand why. You know.
Yeah.
So Pickett's charge, though, isn't the end of it all for July 3rd.
No.
What else is there?
Well, we got those Eric's favorite bunch. The cavalry.
There you go.
Yeah, oh my God.
Come on.
They start the affair, they end the affair.
Favorite.
Yeah, but you do have Farnsworth's charge, I guess, what you're alluding to.
That's one of them, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have Star, Star.
The fight in the wheat field. Too.
And the fight in the wheat field, the reserves.
Okay, the reserves, what do?
Well, they pushed the Confederates back out of the wheat field.
Okay, so they advance.
Yeah.
And then,
and I think that's what Kilpatrick was expecting, was that there'd be a massive Union infantry advance, and then he was going to be supporting it. Yeah.
And you're right, Cam?
Yeah.
What was that?
I don't like Kilpatrick. He killed a bunch of West Virginians that day.
Oh,
there we go.
West Virginia with Cam.
Under Richmond. Yeah, under Colonel Richmond. Yeah. Yeah, but anyway,
it's almost 160 years ago. Get over it.
He's harsh, isn't he? No compassion. No compassion for West Virginia.
We're not known for our empathy around
No, that's
here.
all right. I understand.
Like 50 yards from my house.
Say that louder.
Kilpatrick lines are 50 yards from my house.
That's right. Why don't you just give everybody your address so they can come and stalk you, Cameron?
Yeah, but anyway, I think that's that's quiet. And then you also got the Oratana Road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where they sent the 6th U.S. out there.
Yeah,
because when Wesley Merritt's coming up now, Kilpatrick realizes Pleasanton told him, to support the line, but if you have a chance to attack.
Right.
Because they thought the Confederate Army's in disarray, and now's the time to strike with cavalry. And he asked Merritt to come up to support him. Merritt's part of Buford, but he wasn't there with them on the 1st. And he's
fresh.
And he's fresh, and that's right. And so he comes up, and there was a rumor that there was a wagon train over at Fairfield that was unprotected. So he detached the 6th U.S. to go over and get it. And they run into 2 brigades of Confederate cavalry.
Yeah.
They get shot up real good outside of Fairfield down the Oratana Road.
Okay.
Yeah, and Starr, the commander, dies in Fairfield. Yeah.
What a place to die.
I know. There is no good place to die.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the kind of the final action.
Some of those fights that we just talked about, they're significant, but they get overlooked because they pale in comparison to Culp's Hill. They pale into comparison to what we call Pickett's Charge. If they had occurred in almost any other action in the war, they'd probably get a lot more attention.
Well, like you said, there's a lot of cavalry action going on the 3rd.
Well, so you have Farnsworth's Charge, but you also have some other stuff a little west of there, right? Down the South Cavalry Field area.
Well, that's Merritt.
That's
Merritt.
Part of the same action.
And he's pushing up the Emmitsburg Road.
That's another case where there's dismounted and mounted action.
Right.
Yes,
right.
And that's one of my favorite places to go because nobody. Not the part on the east side of the road, but the part on the west side of the road. That little lane that's back there.
Oh yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I like going out there.
Yeah.
Okay, and then how about, let's see here. I'm looking at my notes here. The 6th Reserves clear Stony Hill. 13th Reserves capture the colors of the 15th Georgia. Okay, tell us about that one.
Well, the Georgians were there, and I don't know much about that one other than it came up. And
I admit I don't know much about that one either, except there was significantly more casualties than.
Yeah.
Well, I know someone who does.
Hear about.
While he hates the cavalry, he loves the reserves.
There he is.
There you go.
There we go.
He is.
I love the reserves.
Yeah, tell us, Eric.
So Mead has that little council up on Little Round Top, right about where the 155th PA monument is now.
Right.
And he's talking with Sykes, and he wants to. It's kind of like a reconnaissance in force, but he basically wants to feel out the right flank of Longstreet's line to see, how practical would it be to launch an assault against Longstreet's right from here. And he points down across Plum Run Valley, and he's pointing to McCandless's brigade of the Pennsylvania Reserves, and they've been there since the evening of the 2nd. He says, whose troops are those? And Crawford, who happens to be there with them, he takes claim because they're his division. And so Meade orders Sykes, who in turn orders Crawford to push McCandless's brigade through the wheat field and clear the wheat field, Stony Hill, and Rose's Woods. And so they do that. And the reserves push forward from the east end of the wheat field across to the west to Stony Hill. The 6th Reserves say they capture a gun and 3 caissons on the west side of Stony Hill. Kind of between the Peach Orchard and Stony Hill. The left 3 regiments then, at least the left 3, so the 13th, 2nd, and 1st Reserves, pivot. And they face south and clear through Rose's Woods to the south side of Rose's Woods, basically on a line from where the top of Devil's Den is over to the Timbers Farm. And they say they clear a handful of sharpshooters out of the Timbers farmhouse, but that's kind of debated as to whether or not that's them or the 6th Reserves on the opposite end of the line. And in the process, Sergeant James Thompson of Company G, 13th Reserves, captures the colors of the 15th Georgia, and he gets a Medal of Honor for it. But he's buried up in Perry County. But yeah, that's kind of the end of it. Cipher, in his history of the Pennsylvania Reserves, talks about Meade. Meade's kind of heartened by the success that they've had because Longstreet basically has to pull his line back to Warfield Ridge at that point. He doesn't have a tenable position where he can anchor his right anymore. So he pulls the rest of his corps back to Seminary Ridge, Warfield Ridge. But it's too late in the day to mount anything. Cipher says the reserves get ordered to clear the wheat field at about 6. Mm-hmm. This probably takes about an hour or so. It's now 7. We know it gets dark at 7:30. 8 o'clock. It's too late in the day to mount anything. So McCandless has halted, and they hold their line through the evening of July 3rd into the morning of the 4th, and then they're relieved.
Yeah.
So that's what happened.
Cool. That's cool.
Well done, Eric.
Very good, Eric.
Awesome.
All right. So let's move on now to the questions from our listeners.
Okay.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to ask questions on Ask a Guides, you need to become a patron over at patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. And here's our first one from Clifton McCurley, a new patron, if I'm not mistaken. He says, so as I understand it, after the explosion of the Confederate laboratory in Richmond, Virginia, in March of '63, the Army of Northern Virginia was issued case-shot artillery fuses from other arsenals, namely the Augusta Arsenal in Georgia. Confederate-made fuses were a little less reliable, but I've heard that the newer fuses from the other arsenals burned a little slower than what the rebel cannoneers were used to, and that this was a contributing factor in the failure of the great bombardment before Pickett's charge. Is there any weight to this, or is this just an apocryphal story?
Well, I'll answer that because I don't think the barrage was a failure.
All right.
I don't think it was a failure. They did have some trouble with the fuses, so there's some.
But even a shell whose fuse maybe doesn't work, let's say, is still going to do some damage when it lands.
Well, yeah,
potentially,
certainly psychological damage. But
sure.
But the target, we tend to assume that the barrage was supposed to disrupt the Union line completely. He can't do it. He can't see it.
Right.
So what he's trying to do is disrupt what's behind the line. So the artillery fire is firing a little higher maybe than it should.
So wait, you think that was on purpose?
Yes, I do. Because if you shoot far and it goes short, you're going to hit the line.
Right.
Okay, and if you shoot far, you're going to hit stuff behind the line.
Right.
Meade has to evacuate his headquarters.
Yeah.
There was confusion among the artillery reserve.
Reserves would be there.
And they're hitting people on Cemetery Hill, Culp's Hill, like I said earlier.
The Spangler Farm.
More people are hit by Confederate artillery on Culp's Hill on July 3rd in the afternoon than were hit the whole rest of the battle combined. Mm-hmm. So, that's what the artillery purposes was to do. And, of course, you can't tell Alonzo Cushing that the artillery barrage was ineffective. Well, that poor guy's he's mortally wounded.
Yeah.
When the Confederates come out of the woods, he can only man 2 of his 6 guns.
Right.
He's taken 67% losses to artillery fire alone.
Yeah.
So how effective was it?
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a common assumption. I've had military groups that said, I had one guy that I had to kind of bite my lip because he was saying that the constant firing, the tongues were wearing a groove in the ground that was elevating the gun.
I've heard that before.
I just thought that one.
I heard that one too.
I know.
And you think the gunners wouldn't know to adjust for that?
Yeah. What do you think these guys are, dummies?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. You're in the third year of the war, pal. They kind of figured it out. Yeah. But anyway, I will say this: that's a common assumption that the artillery barrage was ineffective. I don't buy it, and there is some evidence that the fuses were somewhat faulty, and were bursting longer. They went longer, but they're bursting over Union positions.
It doesn't matter, right? Yeah, because you made the point before. They're kind of in a crescent moon shape, so if you miss what you're aiming at, you're going to hit something behind it.
Right.
All right.
Especially if you're shooting at Cemetery Hill. It's what we call Cemetery Hill itself.
Exactly. That's the objective.
Well, good. I'm glad that question riled you up there, Charlie. And Clifton, you should be ashamed of yourself.
No, you shouldn't.
All right. Roy Mead. He says, did Lee or Longstreet arrange any type of reserve to immediately plug the line after the different divisions of Longstreet's assault were smashed in the charge? Or did Meade miss his chance by not ordering an assault with the chaos of the retreating Confederate soldiers?
No, I was just going to say, I think, You had talked about that earlier with Anderson's.
Yeah, Anderson's division's there, and Lee is trying to organize the troops as they're coming back.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Remember, he meets Pickett.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he says, "You must look to your division." And Pickett said, "I have no division."
I have no division.
Yeah. So he is very active in trying to organize, because he obviously, if you break a charge, you're supposed to make a charge.
Yeah.
And he was hopeful that maybe Meade would come across the field so he could return the favor.
Yes.
And
Meade does not.
No.
Do you think he missed a chance, like the way Roy, his descendant, frames it?
I don't know. I tend to think Meade made the right decision.
Yeah,
I did
too.
Yeah. I don't know what he could have done.
I don't think there was an opportunity.
I admit I'm pro Meade, but I think so. I'm maybe a little biased there, but I think that was the right decision.
Yeah, I'm pro Meade too, but I've become pro Meade because I think the anti-Meade people are just unreasonable. I know what you mean. They're missing huge things.
I honestly think the more you study the campaign, the more respect you earn for Meade.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
6 questions lengths. He's only got one here. He says, outside of Kill Cavalry shenanigans and also the efforts of the Pennsylvania Reserves on clearing Devil's Den, no counterattack was made. What factors prevented Meade from launching a counterattack? So a little bit more in depth from what we're talking about here, or prior to this one. But why did Meade do the right thing? What is he dealing with after Pickett's charge fails?
One is time. To organize a counterattack of that magnitude would have taken time to organize it.
Number one. Number two.
And that time would have, the more time elapses, the more time allows Lee to prepare for that counterattack.
Right. Yeah. So while he's preparing to make the attack, Lee's preparing to accept it, and that's not good. So what's number 2?
Well, it's getting late.
Time. Yeah. Dinner time.
He's getting that well. Yeah, who fights at dinner time? You got to be home for dinner. You know that.
Right.
No, it's actually because it's starting to get dark.
Dark, okay.
So I think Eric alluded to that, with the Pennsylvania Reserves.
Yeah.
It got too dark to really do much more than what they did.
How about are his men in perfect shape? Nobody got hurt?
That's crucial.
Have they eaten? When's the last time they ate?
A lot of units are shattered.
They're shattered from the fighting.
To regroup.
Are they eating well, these Union troops?
A lot of them. Well, the 17th Maine didn't have food for like 2 days.
2 days.
Yeah, I haven't eaten in 2 days.
And I'm sure they weren't the only ones.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So they're not in any good shape. Just because they won the battle doesn't mean they were in any good shape.
The only real reserves you have is the 6th Corps, and they're scattered.
Yeah, they're all
over the place.
So they're not an organized unit.
They've been plagiarized, or not the right word. Cannibalized.
Yeah, I like that word.
Cannibalized. Yeah. Like Burling's brigade on the 2nd.
That's right. Exactly. I have no brigade. Would you like
General Meade?
Would you like some coffee, General Humphreys?
All right, Brian Darenick asks 2 questions. Did Lee assess any other viable options to continue the attack on July 3rd, other than that on the Union Center, which resulted in Pickett's charge? So did he? Culp's Hill.
Yeah,
Culp's Hill.
That was his first plan. Like Charlie always says, it's Pickett's charge is the side show to the big show.
That's what it's called. Nobody believes me.
We believe you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Because we agree.
Yeah.
Okay, and why did Meade decide not to counterattack? Okay, we've answered this twice already, so we're going to leave that alone. All right, that's it. Those are all the questions that we have there. Veronica, you got to come up to a mic, Veronica. You got to be heard. Use Charlie's mic. Put your mouth to it. Don't.
So I have 2 actually, and the one might be super simple, but you made a point.
Into the mic, please.
He yells at me. Do you see this? Then I get gun shy and I don't ask questions next time. You made a point, John, about the difference between the Sharps rifles and the carbines. For somebody that's new, what do you mean? What does that mean?
Good question.
The carbine Sharps would have been relatively common among Union cavalry regiments. The carbine Sharps would have been a much shorter barreled rifle, which of course is not nearly as accurate or long range as a longer barreled infantry rifle. But the Sharps rifle not only had a longer barrel and had a longer effective range than a carbine, it was also a 7-shot repeater. If I recall correctly, I think it had a tubular magazine that held 7 shots, which means that if you're... Yes, and if you're a Confederate, exactly, I'm sorry. If you're a Confederate and you encounter, if you're a Confederate cavalryman and you have a single-shot carbine and all of a sudden you encounter an enemy that has a 7-shot rifle that has much longer range, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. And you see the longer the war, the more the war goes on, as more and more Union regiments acquire those Spencer rifles, they start to gain a decided advantage, especially later in the war. So, but the main difference is the length of the barrel, the rifle versus the carbine. The rifle would have a longer barrel, and also the rate of fire. So that's probably the best.
I appreciate that. I have a second question, maybe for you, Charlie. So you mentioned that you, if I understood this correctly, the belief is that Lee was already, during the fight at Culp's Hill, he was already trying to reassess and make the plan that ended up being what we know as Pickett's charge. My understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but Lee was primarily over on Seminary Ridge on the 3rd. So what can you just describe what kind of communications were taking place from anybody that had knowledge of what was actually going on at Culp's Hill to Lee, and how that would have practically worked, because that's quite a long area of travel for someone to get messages back and forth.
Charlie's moving up to
I'm
the
moving
microphone.
up to the microphone. Get her ready for the bayonet charge. Okay. Yeah, Lee is over on Seminary Ridge most of the time. Okay, and then that's where he wants to strike from. You can see Cemetery Ridge there very clearly. He's probably getting some reports from Culp's Hill. He doesn't go there and look himself. From what I understand, he never sent a staff officer over to assess what was going on. He can hear it. So he can hear the fighting, and the volume increases and decreases as one side or the other is making a charge there. So basically, Longstreet was already told to attack at dawn. So he already has that plan in his mind. Longstreet didn't attack at dawn, so now we got to adjust that somewhat to meet the new circumstances. So that's why while the fight at Culp's Hill's going on, he's over there trying to figure out how to use Longstreet's troops now solo, or if Culp's Hill collapses. But I think by the time they're out there and he's pointing out the wall, I think he realizes at that point that Culp's Hill is probably not going to fall. Yeah, and I think he's been appraised of that. So he's you're right. He's over in Seminary Ridge almost the whole time. Yeah.
Very good questions, Veronica. Cam, you got any? Nothing about the 7th West Virginia? No?
Well, there were 2 regiments West Virginia involved that day. 1st West Virginia Artillery, Battery C, Carlisle's Battery.
Yeah.
Right.
And then 1st West Virginia Cavalry.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so how many total then? 3? 3 units? What'd you say?
There was a 4th one.
What? Which one?
Yeah.
3rd West Virginia, that was on day 1.
Yeah.
There
That's
you
right.
go.
Yeah.
Cavalry.
They're part of Devon.
Yep.
Devon's brigade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Cam, thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's about it for day 3. Tomorrow, look forward to day 4 and 5, July 4th and 5th. And then that'll be it for our anniversary episodes. Thank you very much, Charlie. Always a pleasure. Thank
welcome.
you, John.
Hey,
Thank
Glad
you.
to have you
My
on
pleasure.
finally.
Thank you.
Been talking for like 2 years about doing this. I'm glad you finally got it. We're going to have you on to do one about the Battle of Hanover.
That's cool.
Okay?
That's cool. We can do that. Yeah.
Very good. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening and have a good one. All right, there we go. We have completed.
That was good. Good question.
Our hearts so stout have got us famed, forsooth 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man forget shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man forget shall go